Okay, so today's parasha is Parashat Korach, a parasha full of action. Like all these parashot, there's so much to talk about. The truth is, this week's parasha really has so many important ideas and important things that we can learn from in daily struggle in our lives, and just general way of dealing with adversity. So much to talk about, but we're going to try and focus a little bit on just simply the breakdown of the parasha, because if you look through the psukim, it's not so clear exactly what's going on. So first of all, Parashat Korach. So we just start off with a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. So Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, before we get to the Rashi and what's bothering him, Mishnah chapter 5, Mishnah Yud Zayin 17 or Mishnah Chaf, Mishnah 20, depending on the edition of Pirkei Avot, says the following, very famous Mishnah. Kol machloket shehi l'shem shamayim, says the Mishnah, any dispute that is for the sake of heaven, sofa lehitkayem, will have a constructive outcome. V'she'ena l'shem shamayim, but one that is not for the sake of heaven, en sofa lehitkayem, will not have a constructive outcome. Continues the Mishnah. Ezuhi machloket shehi l'shem shamayim. What sort of dispute was for the sake of heaven? What type of dispute? What type of example? Zu machloket Hillel v'Shamai. The dispute between Hillel and Shammai is a classic example of machloket, of a dispute which was done for the sake of heaven, and therefore sofa litkayem. V'she'ina l'shem Shammai, and what was not considered for the sake of heaven? Zu machloket Korach v'chol adato. This is the dispute of Korach and his entire company. Discussion of exactly that is. And therefore, Ein Sof Litkayem doesn't have a constructive outcome. So I don't want to go too much in the Mishnah, but one thing we do see from this Mishnah, it's so much to discuss on that Mishnah alone, exactly why those examples, exactly the way the wording of the Mishnah, who is it referring to? That's a discussion for Pirkei Avot. But one thing we do see from this Mishnah is very clear that when we talk about a machloket she'ina l'shem shamayim, a dispute that was not l'shem shamayim, the icon that we use, the person that we kind of put up on the pedestal is none other than this week's parasha, none other than Korach. So it's a very interesting thing that it's a very interesting thing that we have, Shlomo, that we actually focus on Korach, because the truth is what happened to Korach was out of this world, literally. In fact, there's another Mishnah in Avot, just a little bit earlier, which says that the Pi Haaretz, one of the 10 things that was actually created Misheshet Imei Bereshit, on the 6th day of creation, Erev Shabbat Ben Hashmatot, during twilight on Friday, in the 6th day of creation, was Pi Haaretz, was actually the opening of the earth, which would eventually swallow up Korach as a result of this dispute. Now let's just kind of put things into perspective. Who exactly is Korach? He's not some, mafia boss, some cartel leader who is a bit of a loser. Korach was one of the greatest people. In fact, Gemara, the fashion quote, Korach tzaddik katamar ifrach. We mentioned Tehillim on Friday night. Sadiq, the last Sofet Tevot, the last letters of the word Sadiq. Kuf, Katamar, Resh, Yifrach, Chet. A tzaddik will rise up like a palm tree. Yeah, we're talking about one of a very, very important member in Klal Yisrael at the time. And actually, the Gemara asks, Korach ma ra'a l'shtut zeh, what was the reason for this sort of nonsense? You know, I mean, to start up with Moshe Rabbeinu is quite a tall order. So what I want to go through is just to break down the parasha into different parts, and I want to have a bit more of an interactive class today. So I hope you got your Chumashim open and try to hear your opinion. Exactly. Sorry, we're doing Parashat Korach.
What chapter?
Chapter Tet Zayin, chapter 16, Pasuk Aleph, Pasuk 1. Bamidbar, Tet Zayin, Aleph. So what we're going to try and do is let's just break down what happened over here. And like I mentioned before, there's lots of action going on in the parasha. So before we begin, first question is, when exactly did this story take place? What time frame did the story of Korach take place? Anyone know?
I mean, I was reading like the commentary on the parsha here, so like there's like two opinions of Ibn Ezra that it was after the build of the tabernacle, and Ramban's opinion that was after the event of the spies.
Very good, beautiful. So famously, the Ibn Ezra and Ramban argue about the exact order of events. We've mentioned this before. Rashi and Ramban have a very famous machloket, very famous argument, whether the Torah is written in chronological order or not. So we've mentioned this countless times in Sefer Bereshit. We mentioned it quite a few times. Is the Torah written one after another, the way the story happened, or does the Torah kind of cut and paste and kind of put stories in a different order whenever necessary? Ibn Ezra's opinion is that yesh mukdam mukhar b'Torah. Yeah, it's not necessarily here, there, and the other. It doesn't matter. Torah puts different events in different stories in different places because most likely there's a certain sequence of what the Torah is trying to teach us. Once met Shmuel Kamenetsky, one of the big Gedolei Israel in New York, 3 years ago. And I was there for a Shabbat. I spent a Shabbat with him at a conference, and I asked him, is there any reason why the Torah would not say give the story over in chronological order? He said he doesn't know any specific reason. He doesn't have a reason, just like that. But the truth is, there's much discussion about each time it does, and every time there's a story which seems to be out of place, everyone dumps up, especially usually Ramban, usually Rashi. But I want to point out really, Ibn Ezra famously says that this happened way back. This happened Rosh Chodesh Nisan, after the inauguration of the Mishkan. Aaron is chosen, and Korach is upset. Why is Aaron chosen, not me? That's one explanation. Ramban says something very interesting. Ramban says no. He says the chronological order, usually it's written in order, unless the Torah is trying to bring out a point, like over here. And there's no reason to say that this parasha was put out of place. Therefore, Korach obviously happened after Shalach, after the story of the spies. Ramban says, I'll prove it to you. How do you know? Anyone got a proof why it would happen after the spies?
Because the people are already kind of like in a revolt. They were unsatisfied with Moshe after the whole events of the spies. So like there's a way to gather the people together against him, because that's the intention of Korah. So I think that's why Moshe puts it in chronology. Ramban puts in chronology.
Ramban goes up that street, but do you have a proof from the Pesukim?
Yeah. Pasuk Tet Zayin, Yudalet Tet Zayin, Eretz Zavat Chalav Dvash.
Oh, that what?
So that's a term that was used by the Meraglim.
Okay, one pasuk before that.
כי לתנו מארץ זבת חלב ודבש למיתנו במדבר אף לא אל ארץ זבת חלב אביותינו ותיתן לנו נחלה שדה. Yeah, that's
But the
it.
pasuk Yud Gimel, pasuk 13, Hame'at ki elitanu me'eretz zavat chalav udvash lamitanu bamidbar. Is it not enough that you brought us up from a land flowing with milk and honey to cause us to die in the wilderness? Who said he's dying in the wilderness? Lamitanu bamidbar. Do you know why? Because last week's parasha, we just got decreed that 40 years they're going to be in the wilderness and they're going to die there. This whole generation. So Datan v'Aviram, as Bernie pointed out very well, that Datan v'Aviram, or Korach really, who was the head of the whole system, yeah.
דתן ואבירם עד בני ראובן ובני לוי.
Very good question. Rashi will do that in a minute.
And also, how many people were in Korah's group? Is it 250 or they were in front of
250 plus Datan v'Aviram, and on Ben Pelet who kind of chickened out at the end, thanks to his good wife. But 1 second. So Ramban said a beautiful idea, which Baruch mentioned before. What happened was, at the beginning, can you imagine, even the time of the Egel, after Matan Torah, let's just kind of think about historically what happened. Jews come out of Egypt with Moshe Rabbeinu. They go through crisis after crisis after crisis. The Egyptians are coming behind them, Kriyat Yam Suf, the sea splits, incredible. Moshe lifts his hand and the sea splits. Incredible. They saw an incredible revelation. Then they go on forward. 50 days later, they have Har Sinai. Moshe Rabbeinu, God literally speaks to them. Greatest revelation ever happened to mankind. Okay, then one story after another. They have the Onanim. They have the issue with the Egel, yeah, the golden calf, and they have the issue with the Meraglim last week. We have story after Slav, all these issues that they have consistently. If you think about it, Moshe Rabbeinu, even at the time of the Egel, was the beloved leader of Klal Yisrael. There was no way, says the Ramban, Nachmanides says there was no way anyone was ever going to challenge the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu.
What is it like?
The only way he could be challenged is if everyone's so upset with him that now the guy who's got a personal agenda kind of jumps and say some silly idea. Why is that? Because at the time of the Egel, Moshe Rabbeinu was always the one who's saving Klal Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu was always the one who's going to God, and after every issue, he's going and praying in front of God, and Hashem, Kel Rachum V'Chanun, 13 attributes of mercy, whatever it is. And every time he's saving them, yes, people die. But every time they're being saved. But after the Meraglim, that was it. What happened? Meraglim are destined to be killed for good. The entire generation are going to be put together, put in the wilderness, in the desert. They're gonna, every Tisha B'Av, they're gonna dig their own graves, and everybody's gonna go and lie. All the people who are aged between age of 20 and 60 are gonna lie in their grave. And the next morning they would wake up, and those that woke up in the morning were able to, bless Hashem for another year. And those that weren't, unfortunately, didn't quite make it. That happened over a period of 40 years. And for one of the reasons why Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, is a very happy day, because that last year, they didn't die. And nobody dies, and everybody wakes up the next morning. So they think, okay, maybe we got a wrong date in the calendar. So they go back again, and they go back again. And every night they go back into the graves, thinking that who knows who's going to die tonight. Until the 15th of Av, a couple of days later, they realize, okay, it's not happening. It's all good. It says Tosfot in Sotah. Therefore, that was a reason for celebration. That's why it's known in the Mishnah as one of the famous happy days in Klal Yisrael. Not a Jewish Valentine Day, but rather, says Tosfot, that was the reason of the happiness. But either way, says Ramban, the reason why they came on was because Korach always had a problem. He always wanted to challenge Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership. Yet, how can you challenge Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership when he's a beloved person? He'll be shot down by the masses. When they were now decreed to all die, so now you can imagine the public are not feeling so great. So now Korach realizes he's an opportunist. Now's my chance. Okay, let's take him down. Therefore, it was literally, says Ramban, it was literally after last week's parasha, continued this week's parasha, and that's why Korach, Tana, Aviram actually say, Lahamitenu Bamidbar, that you were the one that basically is giving the certificate for us to die in the Midbar. Okay, that's just in terms of historical point of departure where this is, but now I kind of want to discuss a little bit what actually happened. So, can anyone tell me exactly what was Korach's issue? What was his problem? And what was he challenging? Don't forget, Korach is coming together with Datan Aviram, who were known troublemakers in Klal Yisrael. You know, Rashi points out in a few places, Datan Aviram were always causing trouble. From the time of within Egypt to later on. On Ben Pele is another one. We don't hear much about later on. Midrash says, like I mentioned before, his wife saved him. She got him drunk the night before, and they left him alone. So he got saved. And then there's the 250 Nesieh Edah. These are very, very important people. Again, just proves to you this is not just anyone. These are leaders of the assembly. So now they're coming along, and they've all got issues apparently. So it's not just Korach who's got one issue. He's managed to convince 250 plus leaders of the generation to be able to kind of attack Moshe Rabbeinu and just kind of demote him. So what's going on? Yes, yeah.
So the issue is the same, we are all very important people, but
Okay.
why you and Aaron think that you are higher than us? So it's challenging the leadership in a way that, maybe God, how do we know that God chose you and maybe, God would choose us?
Okay, so that's the simple understanding of Psukim. So I've got a question for you, Shalom, before I get to you. I've got a question for you. Because so what happens, just go through the Psukim. Moshe Rabbeinu, they have this whole issue. Moshe Rabbeinu suggests that maybe they should bring out the Ketoret. Either 250 men, all of you bring the incense. And you know what? And they all went ahead. Now, bringing incense, first of all, seems to be an attack on the Kehuna, not on Moshe Rabbeinu. Because otherwise, what's the point of Ketoret? Ketoret was done uniquely by Kohanim. So I'm not exactly sure what this element is. Okay, Shlomo, jump in.
What Korach is Levi,
Good, okay.
and Moshe, from my understanding, started to differentiate between a Kohanim and the Leviim. He gave the Kohanim a higher status,
Aaron.
and Mishpachat Kehat, the Kehat family, which is related to Moshe, and Korach is saying you're giving the Kedusha and the Kehuna and the important stuff to people in your inner circle. That's not fair.
Okay. So what did they want?
They want to be equal. They want to be part of that Kedusha. As Leviim, I think he's here representing the Leviim, not just his 250 people. And he say, you give the Kohanim all that importance and all the tasks and everything to do, that is the leadership and the important stuff to do for the Am Yisrael, and we want that too.
Okay, so here's the question. Two questions. Question number one is, do Leviim bring Ketoret? Do Leviim bring Ketoret, the incense, which was,
No.
Everyone brings frying pans, and we're going to prove. Let's look at the pasuk. Vayikchu ish machlato vayitnu alehem esh. Let's go with the pasuk. Here, pasuk Yud Zayin. Pasuk Tet Zayin. Pasuk 16. Vayom Moshe el Korach. And Moshe says to Korach, Ata v'chol adatecha, you and your cronies, Heyu lifnei Hashem, will be in front of God, Ata v'hem v'Aaron machar. You, them, and Aaron tomorrow. Wait, what about Moshe?
The challenge is the Kehuna.
Are you challenging Moshe or are you challenging Aaron? What's going on over there?
No, you're challenging Aaron.
But you just said we're challenging the leadership. Then
Yeah.
Moshe's kind of
No. Challenging the idea of Kohanim are higher level than Levim.
No, I think that we want to be a Kohen, Shlomo. I think that he wants to be in the same circle as Aaron. Moshe, I don't think it's maybe challenging Moshe's authority, but more of his brother.
Okay. So if it's challenging Aharon, then that makes a lot of sense, right? Because, everyone brings the Ketoret. Let's see who's going to be the Kohen Gadol. Whoever the Kohen Gadol will be the final winner. Last one standing, literally.
No, by challenging Aaron, they're challenging Moshe.
Why?
Because Moshe appointed, Moshe told Aaron, God told Moshe to tell Aaron that he's the Kohen.
Oh,
So
okay, very good.
the moment you
So
touch
it's
Aaron,
interesting. That's a very good point. Because if you look at Pasuk Chavchet, Pasuk 28, Vayomer Moshe says, first of all he says, everyone, Hibadlu mitoch ha'edah, Tzur na'mal alolei ha'anshim ha'rashaim ha'ele. Move away from these people. Separate yourselves. Vayomer Moshe, Pasuk Chavchet, Pasuk 28, Bezot tedeun, through this you shall know, Ki Adonai shelachani, lasot kol ma'asim ha'ele ki lo melibi. That Hashem sent me to perform all these acts, that it was not from my heart. Moshe Rabbeinu is kind of standing up to some major issue over here, and not only is he standing up to a major issue, but he's asking God to do something unprecedented. In fact, it's so out of this world that God, for whatever reason, had to designate this thing to create it Erev Shabbat Ben Hashmashot, like I mentioned in the Mishnah at the beginning. This is something which is wild. Now, this was not instructed by God. Moshe is being challenged, or Moshe, Aharon, you said it, Aharon, and by extension Moshe, which doesn't seem like from the Pasuk. The Pasuk says literally, you are challenging my leadership. This is what Moshe is saying. It's not me, I made this up. And he's asking God to create the situation where the world will open up, the ground will open up, swallow up, not an earthquake, because an earthquake kind of swallows up everyone. An earthquake will happen, very confined, very restricted, and immediately go back as if there will be no zecher. There will be no way of knowing that anything ever even happened over there. There's no like a big crack, or it was over here. So that was an incredible Ve'im Beriah Yivra Hashem, Pasuk Lamed, Pasuk 30. That if God will create a phenomena and the earth opens up its mouth and swallows them up, then you'll know you know that these men have provoked Hashem. And that's actually what happened. Now, okay, so if that's the case, what happens next? So, go on, Eyal.
when you look next, basically what they establish is that the only Kohanim will come only from Aaron's seeds. So this is that was basically the final right?
Issue. Okay, I'm gonna ask you on that in a minute. We're gonna get to that in a minute. 1 second. Just first of all, what let's break down the psukim. So they have the issue. He removes them. He prays for this major miracle. The miracle happens. Korach, his family, and Datan v'Aviram's family all get totally swallowed up. Then back to normal. Yeah, the ground covers up. Then ve'esh pasuk lamed hey. Everybody starts running away from the earthquake. From this phenomena that Shlomo put on the WhatsApp group this week. This thing that happened in Shari Tzedek on Sunday. Suddenly, the earth opens up. It's incredible. Everybody starts running away. What's going to happen? Who knows how far it's going to go? And then ve'esh pasuk lamed hey, pasuk 35. Ve'esh yatza me'et Adonai, and a flame came forth from Hashem. ותאכל את 50-200 איש מקריבי הקטורת, and consume the 250 men who were offering the incense. Okay, so there's stage one, let's call it, where Korach, Datan, Aviram, and all their families get slaughtered up. Rashi points out how bad machloket is, that machloket consumes everyone. What did the young children do, Rashi says? What were they bad? What was wrong with them? Yeah, because when a person's in machloket, everything gets consumed. Terrible, terrible story. I heard a terrible, scary story last week. I'll just mention it because we're a small group today. There was someone who was very. I'm not sure exactly the details of the story, but there was some issue with the Chafetz Chaim, and there was someone who was really challenging the Chafetz Chaim, and he was a big Baal Machloket. He was known in the community as someone who's just got issues with everyone, and he was always the guy that's just causing problems. One day, his son got terribly ill, and the Chafetz Chaim called him in. It was a scary story. Chafetz Chaim calls him in. He says, I want you to know that machloket creates a very negative energy. And if you're involved in machloket, the energy can go to everyone around you. He said, I just want to tell you that I strongly recommend you keep away from the concept of machloket. The story goes, the person told him, I want the Chafetz Chaim back. He said, I would sacrifice all my family as long as I'm right. That's how far machloket is. Incredible. But that's the thing, machloket can literally consume everyone. We see the concept of it literally physically consumed Korach. But either way, let's carry on. So first the whole thing with the pit, and then Ve'esh yatsa me'et Hashem, the 250 people get consumed with fire. Then what happened? Elazar HaKohen goes and takes these special pans and makes a special cover for the Mizbeach out of these pans. Pasuk says, Pasuk hey, V'lo yeh kekorach chadato, kasher dibar Adonai bi'ad Moshe lo. There's an Isur Torah. There's a Torah prohibition to be like Korach, to stick with machloket. Okay? Now, Pasuk Vav, Pasuk 6. Vayilonu kol adat b'nei Yisrael, mimachorat al Moshe ve'Aaron emor. Atem habitem et am Adonai. So you can imagine what happened. 250 plus people have died. There's been this crazy situation happened, and the complaints don't stop. And the Jewish people say to Moshe, Moshe and Aaron, you have killed the people of Hashem. It's your fault. Now, forget the fact that Moshe had nothing to do with all of this. In fact, the Mefarshim on the Mishnayot say a beautiful idea. The Mishnah I mentioned in the beginning. It says, what is considered dispute, which is the Shem Shamayim? The machloket Hillel v'Shammai. Okay, Hillel Shammai argued. It's interesting, in Judaism, we're the only legal system that studies the dissenting opinion. It's incredible. We know what the law is, but we always study the opinion which we argue with. Abai and Rava, we argue. We go with Abai, we go with Rava. We study both opinions. Rav and Shmuel, we study both opinions. Hillel Shammai, we study both opinions, even though we know what the halakha is. What's considered dispute is not Shem Shamayim? Zeu Korach ve'adato. This is Korach and his group. Now, if you look at the Mishnah, it kind of doesn't work because there's two sides to every machloket, right? There's Hillel versus Shammai. This Korach versus Moshe. Chazak Baruch. So, but it doesn't say that in Mishnah. It says Korach ve'adato. So there's many explanations. One of the explanations is Korach ve'adato because they themselves were fighting amongst themselves. Because people that fight usually tend to fight amongst themselves. And the only common ground they had is when they have one person they want to fight against, they say, oh, you know what, let's actually, unite against our common enemy. But usually people who are problem makers have a history of problem making. That's one thing. But the other explanation is, the truth is, The only people that were squabbling to them. Moshe and Aaron were never part of this machloket. They came and they start challenging Moshe and Aaron. So if you ask me who's the machloket of Shem Shamayim, it's not Korach versus Moshe. It's Korach and his cronies. It's not. There's no two sides over here, and that's Shalom Shem Shamayim. But either way, what's going on over here? The next day, they actually blame Moshe, who had no deal with this, and they say, "You actually killed. You killed all these people." Yeah.
Baruch wants to say something.
What's the name of this term you're saying again? Like, how do I spell it? Just because I want to look it up on my what? And like, how do you spell that? Just so I can look it up later.
Machloket?
Machloket?
Yeah. How do I spell that?
You look at the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers. Look at chapter 5, Mishnah 20.
Chapter 5.
Chapter 5, Mishnah 20. In some versions, it could be Mishnah 17. Either way,
Thank you.
Eyal, you want to say something?
Rabbi, everyone is against Moshe and Aaron. You know, like,
What's going on?
like after they saw what happened, all of them are coming and continuing to blame. Like, what kind of
Eyal's in shock. He doesn't know. I mean, clearly he's not the president of a synagogue. He can't understand. Why would people want to complain? Right? I mean, so, I mean, what's going on? So here's my question to you. What is their problem? You've just kind of dealt with your issues.
I don't know.
And there's actually been this plague, or not plague over here. There was this fire that consumed these 250 people. Korach and Datam Aviram and the families are swallowed up, and people are still blaming, and they're still complaining. What are they complaining about? Shlomo.
I could be completely off the mark, but I think human nature, we don't like change. And since Bnei Israel and Moshe and Aaron got into a relationship, the change is all the time initiated by Moshe and Aaron, and Bnei Israel have to comply. And it's enough for the littlest thing to go wrong to say, oh, you see, because we changed, because what you did. And it's of course, everything is guided by Hashem, but they are the messengers that make them move. So get up from Egypt and move, do this, circle around the mountain, and all that. Everything, there's always something that they have to get out of the comfort zone and do because there's a goal. They need to get to Eretz Israel. But whenever something, the littlest thing go wrong, it's the people who initiated the change is to blame.
So you're saying that this has nothing to do with the issue at hand, which we discussed before, challenging Moshe, challenging Aaron. This is just a general issue.
It's a build-up.
It's a build-up. This has nothing to do with what happened before.
Aren't they afraid?
In terms of Ta'ana, in terms of the thing which they're complaining about, is not necessarily related because it was as clear as the light of day that who's right over here, Moshe and Aaron.
Yeah.
So the question is, don't forget, as a follow-up result of this, you carry on the Psukim, Yud Daled, Pasuk 14, there's a terrible plague. And how many people die in this plague? Vayu hametim magefa 14,700 milvat hametim al dvar Korach. You want to know what machloket is? I'll tell you what machloket is. 14,700 people died besides for the 250 that died and with the consumed by fire, and besides for Korach and Atam Aviram and their whole families, which also got swallowed up by things. So we're talking about almost 15,000 people who were consumed because of some ridiculous idea, which involves machloket. The question is, according to you, Shlomo, it doesn't really sound like it's connected, but yet there's, I mean, suppose on one hand it does sound like it makes sense because this is an ongoing issue of complaints. And as a result of the complaints, which is so ongoing, then, 14,700 people die because this is an ongoing issue. I mean, Rashi actually points out, maybe we should just point out the Rashi. Rashi says, the first thing what happened was, when they came to Moshe Rabbeinu with all these problems, when Korach came, what was the immediate response of Moshe? Pasuk Dalet, let's go back. Pasuk Dalet, yeah, Pasuk 4. Vayishma Moshe, vayipol al panav.
Yeah.
Moshe, here's the next problem, and he falls on his face. So simply we understand, because I mean they're challenging his leadership. This is a personal affront to his leadership in general. Rashi points out something very interesting. Vayipol panav, says Rashi, bipenei hamachloket, because of the argument. Why? Shekvar zeh bi'adam sirachon revi'i, because it's the fourth issue. It's the fourth incident which has happened in the previous couple of months. Chatu be'egel, they had an issue with the egel, the golden calf. Vaychal Moshe. Bamitonanim, when they started complaining, vayipalel Moshe, he prayed. Bamraglim, with the spies, vayom Moshe l'Hashem b'sham mitzrayim. Again he prayed. And it's the fourth time. Achok shakor, nashri yadav. Moshe Rabbeinu lifted up his hand. He said, "I'm done. I'm fed up." Mashal ben Merch Sarach Aviv uPiyes alav Avav Pam B'Shtayim Shalosh. Parable goes to a son of a king which messed up, and the friend of the king every time goes and tries to pacify the king. Listen, this time it was just this, and it was because of that, because of that. Second time, third time, the fourth time, Sarach Aviv Nidrashnu Yidei Ohevahu. He says, how much more of this can I actually go to the king and say, look, it was this, it was that. It's ongoing. So we see this element, like you were saying, Shlomo, that there seems to be an ongoing complaint. But here's the next question. The next part of the parasha is that Moshe does a test. What's the test? He takes the staffs, one staff of every shevet. He writes the name of the shevet, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, and he takes the staff of Levi, and on the staff of Levi he writes Aharon, and he puts in the Kodesh Kodashim, and miraculously, next morning they wake up, famous Vayotze Perach, Vayatzet Tzitz, Vayigmor Shkedim, Pasuk 23. He took out Matei Aaron, and out had blossomed bud and almonds and ripened. This incredible overnight miracle which happens overnight. Now, so what exactly is going on over here? If we've already dealt with the issue before, why the need? If we didn't deal with the issue before, what was the point of that whole kind of fiasco with the Ketoret? And maybe more importantly, if there was a way, an easy way to pacify or to kind of relax the people without bloodshed, to do that in the first place. No, Korach, we're going to do something out of this world. We're going to God's going to create a complete new creation. You guys with the Ketoret, you're going to stand there. You're doomed to failure because there's only one guy who can anyway be the Kohen Gadol. So I don't know what you're playing with. There's only going to be one guy standing, and you want to take your chances. And guess what? They all died. So what's going on? There's something very strange going on over here. Just the order of the parasha needs a little bit of clarity. Who is it? What were they coming up against? What was the issue? And why did it have to be broken down in such a difficult manner? So let's try a little bit of Rashi. Very interestingly, first Rashi on the parasha. Rashi doesn't do this often. Vayikach Korach. So let's just read the pasuk. Pasuk Aleph. Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahat ben Levi. And Korach, the son of Yitzhar, the son of Kahat, the son of Levi. Vayikach. And he took. Okay. Vedatan v'Aviram b'nei Eliyav. And Datan v'Aviram, the sons of Eliyav. Ve'on ben Pelet b'nei Reuven. And On ben Pelet, the offspring of Reuven. So first of all, question number one is, first of all, On ben Pelet, Datan v'Aviram, was Eyal's question before, is Bnei Reuven going on Datan v'Aviram, or only on them Pelet? Is it going on both, or is it going on the last one? Yeah, again. V'Datan v'Aviram b'nei Eliyav v'Omer Pelet b'nei Reuven. Is Bnei Reuven, the end of the pasuk, going on Datan v'Aviram and on the Pelet? Or is it V'Datan v'Aviram b'nei Eliyav? We're not sure whichever they come from. We know where Korach's from is from Levi. Datan v'Aviram, we're not sure from. V'Omer Pelet b'nei Reuven. And Omer Pelet, the sons who come from the tribe of Reuven. Says Rashi, to quickly point out that Rashi, because that's Rashi addresses. Bnei Reuven, who is it referring to? Datan v'Aviram v'Omer Pelet. You want to know who they're from? They're all from the Shevet of Reuven. Now, Vayikach Korach. Rashi's first question is, what does Vayikach mean?
Yeah, from the grammar point of view, it doesn't make sense.
What doesn't it make sense? Can you explain?
Well, Vayikach, he took something, and then the Tan v'Aviram, I guess here they're saying he was able to get them, to join him.
Okay, so Vayikach is referring to the person or the action?
The action.
Action.
This is he Vayikach, from what I'm reading, he's taking a piece, לוקח חלק, which is חלק.
Of what?
רגע, before that, לוקח חלק, חלק זה כמו מחלוקת, אתה מחלק, אתה מפריד. So he's separating himself.
So action or person?
Well, it should be Vayikach et Datan v'Aviram v'Omer Pelech.
Right.
That's it.
Right?
It's a strange.
He's segregating.
Who is he's segregating himself or he's segregating other people?
No, himself and another group from Klal Israel.
But then they're doing the same action. Ve'akumu, all of them.
But is that Vayikach? And he takes. It's not Vayikach.
Not
It's
exactly.
strange, right? The wording is a little bit off over here.
But
The way they translate it,
Onkelos call it
and he separates himself. Oh no.
באונקלוס,
Oh.
שזה ארמית,
Okay.
הוא אומר, ויתפלג.
Oh. First Targum Onkelos.
Maybe he took the leadership.
Vitpaleg. He's separated. Okay, but let's see what Rashi has to say about this. Obviously, Rashi's got to deal with this, right? Yes, yeah.
Vayikach means that he's taking the lead.
Okay, I like that as well. So you're all right. Rashi says two perushim. First Rashi, second Rashi, or third Rashi we'll jump to. Sorry, second Rashi. Vayikach Korach. So Rashi's obviously bothered. What's bothering Rashi? Vayikach. It doesn't make sense. It's out of context. What did he take? We kind of go in the whole history, a family tree over here. Korach, son of Yitzhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi. Interesting to note, he doesn't mention Yaakov. That's the next Rashi. And then Vatan v'Aviram b'nei Eliyav, and Omer Pelet b'nei Reuven. Very nice. But what's Vayikach? We've forgotten about that. Says Rashi, לקח את עצמו לצד אחד, לצד אחר, להיות נחלק מתוך העדה. לעורר על הכהונה. He took himself to separate himself. And he quotes, Rashi quotes the Onkelos, שתרגם Onkelos והתפלג, like Shlomo mentioned. נחלק משאר העדה להחזיק מחלוקת. Okay? First Perush of Rashi is, it's not a physical taking. Rather, Korach has removed himself from the rest of Klal Yisrael. He's now stating a stand where he's now challenging the leadership of Klal Yisrael at the time.
אל תפרוש מן הציבור.
Oh, okay. We'll discuss that in a minute. Thank you for reminding me. Okay, just give me 1 second. Finish the Rashi. We'll get to that question, and we'll try and come back to the beginning. דבר אחר, ויקח קורח, משך ראשי סנהדריות שבהן בדברים. כמו שנאמר, קח את הארון, קחו מכם דברים. What did he do? A bit like what Eyal said before. He actually tried to grab the people. He took the people with his words. He managed to convince them with his arguments that, hey guys, this is it. This is what we should be doing. Something is wrong over here. Now here's the question. Did Korach have any, did his issue make sense? I mean, of course we understand that, hey, you just look at the language of Datan v'Aviram. Moshe Rabbeinu tries to go and go out to them and appease them. It's interesting to note, Rashi points out later on, in Pasuk Yud Bet, Vayishlach Moshe likro Datan v'Aviram. Moshe Rabbeinu sends out a delegation to call Datan v'Aviram to kind of figure it out. Says Rashi, says Rashi, from here we see we don't try to keep the status quo when it comes to machloket. Shaya Moshe mechazer achrehem limam divrei shalom. Moshe Rabbeinu tried to work it out. It's interesting to note, I think I once heard this once, I couldn't find today. It's interesting to note, he didn't go to run after Korach.
Yeah.
He tried to get the undercurrent to see if he can manage to get someone who's perhaps not so consumed. Because Korach was kind of a lost cause. There was no point in trying. He wasn't even at the table. You need two people at the table to be able to kind of figure out any issues. But he tried. And what did they answer? If they would gouge out the eyes of those men, we should not go up. No way. This is straight. That sort of, disrespect is out of this world, right? So that's clear that the way they handled this whole issue was definitely below the belt. The question is, did Korach have something good to say? Was there some substance to what Korach is saying? Yeah.
Can you explain what does it mean? He says, Adonai, אל תפר מלכתם, לא חמור אחד מהם נסעתי, ולא ראיתי את אחד מהם.
Yeah, so
what are you talking about?
Rashi says, I'll just read you the Rashi quickly, I'll answer your question. לא חמור אחד מהם נסעתי, what does that mean? Moshe Rabbeinu says, Pasuk Tetvav, Pasuk 15, do not turn to the gift offering, I have not taken even a single donkey of theirs. Says Rashi, לא חמורו של אחד מהם נטלתי. אפילו כשהלכתי ממדיין למצרים, והרכבתי את אשתי ואת בניי על החמור, והיה ליטול אותו החמור משלהם, לא נטרתי אלא משלי. Says Rashi, Moshe Rabbeinu was so careful with the money of the Jewish people that he said, even though when he came on a business trip to the Bamidbar to save the Jewish people, God instructs him, go save the Jewish people, take them out of Egypt. He goes with his wife and children, and then he meets Aaron. He says, what are you bringing wife and children? We've got enough slaves over here. You're going to bring more people in? Send them back home. But he rides on a donkey, the Pasuk says. Now, that donkey, who should have paid for that ticket? The business trip. He's told by God, go. So who should pay for that?
Bnei Israel.
Bnei Israel should come out of the kitty. Says Moshe Rabbeinu, even that donkey which I should have taken from that, I didn't take. How careful Moshe Rabbeinu was. So don't tell me it's because, Moshe Rabbeinu takes money and, on the side he gets fat from these things. The Gemara says in Yuma that the Jewish people saw Moshe Rabbeinu, he became wealthy. They said, he must be, maybe getting fat on our expense. No. Moshe Rabbeinu had his own thing. God made sure he would become wealthy. But people always have something negative to say when it comes to leadership. Yes,
Rabbi, I heard, it's a bit a different topic, but it's connected. The leaders of the Hamas, right? Each of them has billions of dollars.
sure.
And you ask yourself, what did they work at that they make so much money, right?
Fundraising, money that had to go to the people of Gaza went to their pockets.
Exactly.
The ultimate corruption. Please use your head.
Right, so that's what he's saying. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying.
I know that. What I'm saying is that look at the leadership, look at the examples. And Moshe is not even taking a donkey.
What he deserves. Exactly. Shlomo.
I have a question about the description of the people that Korach gathered around him. 250 נשיאי עדה, קראי מועד, אנשי שם.
Very great people.
Now, really, these people are getting called into the Oil Moed. This is my understanding by Kriyei Moed.
Right.
But
Right.
my question is this: there's a very famous machzor shel Chagim, and it's called Kriyei Moed, which is to me is kind of doesn't fit very well. It's like you have a machzor, you say Lashon Korach. You don't, the connotation and the connection and the association is really. Because I know that name. I know this. It's a Kriyei Moed. Yeah, there's a machzor like that.
It's a good point. It's a play on words because Moed is like Moadim, so it's like a play on words. But Kriyei, Likro Moed, it's like a play on words. But it's a cute, it's interesting. There's a discussion about not calling after the Sha'im, children after the Sha'im. Chetshuva brings someone like Korach. You don't call him, hey baby Korach, not a good idea. You don't call after someone who's a Rasha. But either way, coming back to our point, because we have to wrap up, we've got in the last 5 minutes. Did Korach have something smart to say? Was there substance to his discussion? So first of all, the mere fact that he's able to convince 250 people who are not just, anyone. This is, some of the greatest people in the generation. There must be some real stuff that's going on over here. It can't just be a personal agenda, which he's trying to convince. He's managed to convince 250 people.
It's a coup. He's trying to change.
Yeah, but this coup, the question is, there must be something substantive to be able to create such a coup. You don't say, okay, guys, let's just take on the most influential, powerful, and greatest humble man in the history of mankind, and let's just kind of take him down. This is not the Israeli politics over here, right? That's number one. Number two, never do we have in the Torah something, we've mentioned this countless times in this series of What's Bothering You, Rashi, that the Torah never mentions something which doesn't have any element which will be able to teach us. That means there's so many times that the Torah discusses things at great length, and Rashi points out why, and so many times there's huge chunks of stuff which we know nothing about from the Pasuk, but Rashi brings all sorts of Midrashim, the Gemara brings all sorts of Midrashim to kind of fill in the gaps of what happened. And yet the Torah doesn't feel a need to say it. Why? Because there's nothing for us to learn from that. So if the Torah actually goes and says a bit of the discussion, seemingly there's something from that discussion which we need to learn from. So let's just look, 1 second, Shlomo. What exactly is Korach's ta'ana? What is his problem? So the Pasuk said it, Eyal mentioned before. No, Pasuk.
But, Korach doesn't say anything.
1 second. No, he does. 1 second.
Where?
Vayikalu al Moshe v'Aaron, Pasuk Gimel, Pasuk 3.
That's not Korach.
That's him and his cronies, yeah? He was most likely he was a spokesman.
Yeah.
Rashi brings Korach was a spokesman over here. Vayoru alehem, they say to Moshe and Aaron, Rav lachem.
It's greed.
Is it too much for you? Ki kol ha'eda kulam kedoshim. Because the entire assembly, all of them are all kedoshim, are all holy. Ubetocham Adonai, and Hashem is amongst them. Umadua titnasu al kahal Adonai. Why do you exalt yourselves over the congregation of Hashem? Is that a good thing, a good point, or a negative point? Yes or no?
Yeah.
The fact that Torah says it, he didn't go with all the nitty-gritty, but Torah pointed it out.
But he's missing something out.
No.
He's missing that Moshe and Aaron was elected and selected by Hashem.
But
So in essence, what Korach is doing here is challenging Hashem authority.
But how
Because
do you
he's saying, why titnasu? Madua titnasu? Well, it's obvious. He knows the answer, but he's basically challenging Hashem. And I think this is why the punishment was so great. Because he's challenging Hashem.
Yeah,
Okay.
but how do you know? When do you see anything in the Torah that Hashem tells Bnei Israel that Moshe and Aaron are the leaders?
He said in the previous parasha, only to Moshe I spoke face to face.
Yeah,
Exactly.
maybe Moshe invented the
Chosen by Moshe, and Moshe he tells Moshe to choose Aaron.
yeah,
Well,
but
okay.
that's Moshe's story. How do you prove it? See, God they're saying basically, in a way, this is what you tell us, right?
So now you've hit the nail on the head. Exactly. What seems to be that, okay, so the question which we asked before is, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why did Moshe Rabbeinu more like insist on such an extreme form of divine retribution on this thing? I mean, what's the big deal? Okay, he's challenging leadership. Many people have challenged leadership, and perhaps there's nothing wrong with challenging leadership. Sometimes, if leadership is not challenged, it can turn to a dictatorship at times. So is that such a bad thing? So again, put aside the disrespect, but the actual substance of the point. So the Mepharshim point out, the commentators explain, that's exactly the point. Moshe Rabbeinu was prepared to take a gamble. There was huge stakes over here, because what's going on? If God would not create this crazy situation where he would create this, the earth would swallow up Korach, then Moshe's leadership and every single thing that he said means nothing. Torah Sinai means nothing. If Torah Sinai means nothing, it's a shame because I want to read out the Rashi. I'll just tell you just where you can look. Rashi in Pasuk Aleph, the last Rashi, Vedatam V'Aviram, Rashi points this out. And basically what he said is you should just know that if they don't appreciate who I am and that I'm standing for God and God is telling me what to do and I'm not making stuff up for myself, then the whole thing's gone out the window. And therefore, there has to be such change. But just to kind of break down, because we've run out of time, it seems to be there was numerous different issues. First of all, he was challenging Korach himself at a chip on his shoulder because he wanted to get some leadership position. Rashi, that same Rashi points out that he felt like Moshe is the son of the oldest son of Levi, Kahat, and therefore there were 4 sons, and it should be the first son of Levi, of Kahat, is Moshe. Okay, so he takes the leadership. Next son is Ben Yitzhar, should be, which is Korach. He should be the next one in place for the next position, not Aharon, his brother. And who took the head of the Nesi'im? Who took the important role of like a prince in Klal Yisrael? That was the youngest brother, the fourth son. So what's going on over here? It says Korach, there's something going on over here. You are taking on a position of authority and bringing in the close members of the family to be able to make these great decisions of who's who and what's what. Why? Because you want to control everything. Says Korach, we're not having this. But that's not what Korach said straight out. Korach says, Ki kol ha'edah kulam kedoshim. Because the way he did it was, based on the Ramban we mentioned in the beginning, was he mobilized the forces after there was this, once Klal Yisrael were unsettled, then he goes and mobilizes everyone. Everyone had other issues. Ki kol ha'edah kulam kedoshim. Everyone are holy. Everyone can be Kohanim. And if they can't be Kohanim, everyone can be Levim. How could they be Kohanim? Because the Mepharshim explained that all these people, the Nesi'ei Ha'edah, were all Bechorim, they're all firstborns. Before the Egel, who was serving in the Mishkan? Who was supposed to serve in the Mishkan? The firstborn. Or Racham HaKadosh says that when Bet HaMikdash comes back, the firstborn sons will be serving in the Bet HaMikdash in place of the Kohanim. And therefore, these Nesi'ei Ha'edah wanted to serve in the Bet HaMikdash. And if not that, the Rashi points out later, he says Levi'im. And he says to them, Rav Lachem Levi, you already got something. What are you so worried about? So there's multiple issues going on. There's the challenging of Moshe's leadership. There's the challenging of Aharon as the Kohen Gadol, which later gets proven, both with the Ketoret and then later on with the staff. Then there's the challenging of the Kehuna versus Kol Ha'edah Kulam Kedoshim, and the challenging of the Levi'im, that the fact that they are all Bechorim, they're all firstborns, maybe they can also be involved. But there's one element which we can learn from this, is that, you know what? Kol ha'edah kulam kedoshim. You're right. The entire nation are kedoshim. They did hear HaKadosh Baruch Hu at Har Sinai. They were all great. So why can't we all be equal? What he didn't realize, Korach, was this, I suppose, what they call today the theory of postmodernism, where there's everyone's the same. We're all equal. Don't worry. We've all got levels of greatness that match each other. Kulam kedoshim. What they didn't realize was that Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Hibadlu mitoch ha'edah." You have to separate yourselves. The point is true. You're all great, but it works with the greatness of character. There are hierarchies in the way a person becomes great. If a person works on themselves to the level that they can become greater, then they get elevated. Moshe and Aaron were so great, they were chosen by God. But as the Rambam says, V'lo shevet Levi bilvad, very famous Rambam. We'll finish off with this. Rambam finishes off, he says, you think yourself, I wasn't born a Kohen. I wasn't born a Levi. It's not fair. Says the Rambam, V'lo shevet Levi bilvad. It's not only shevet Levi, but rather, Kol echad ve'echad Israel, every Jewish person who wants to take on, to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, can sit down and study and become a Talmid Chacham, and to take a part in Torah learning, and be connected to God. And that way, as the Rambam says, Kohen Ama'aretz versus a Mamzer Talmid Chacham, a Kohen who's a ignoramus. He's born with all the, all the background, all the lineage, versus a Talmid Chacham who is a Mamzer. Doesn't matter. Who's greater? Mamzer Talmid Chacham. Why? Because it's what we make of what we do. It's what we plug into. How we take Kol ha'edah kulam kedoshim. Yes, we were great and we are great because we were chosen as a chosen nation. We were given the Torah by Har Sinai. But it's not good enough to be born into it. It's about what we do with it. And I think that is what the Torah is teaching us. Because Korach is saying, Kol ha'edah kulam kedoshim. It's not just trying to tell us how the dialogue went. There was some substance to the Korach thing. And in fact, that's why Korach himself and his Edah all died, but the frying pans were still around. And that they were made as a zecher on Mizbeach, as like a kav for Mizbeach, to remind you that the substance of the argument was good. The way they did it was unacceptable, but the substance was there. Okay.
But, Rabbi, there's another point. I think that the